From the headquarters of Telesur English in Quito, Ecuador, I am Estefania Bravo. This is From the South, and a special welcome to our viewers in Antigua and Barbuda. Two nemesis have agreed to meet. In a shocking turn of events, U.S. President Donald Trump has accepted an invitation from North Korean leader Kim Jong-un. It will be the first time the head of the two states will meet face-to-face. Just months ago, they were threatening to wipe each other out. Expected to take place in May. According to the South Korean delegation, Kim has agreed to freeze Pyongyang's nuclear program during the dialogue. News of the impending dialogue was welcomed by South Korea, which has been on edge about the eruption of a nuclear war. A thawing of relations between Washington and Pyongyang is beneficial for China as well. Part of the reason tougher sanctions on North Korea could result in millions of refugees crossing into China and the constant presence of U.S. troops on its borders.
We welcome the positive news of direct talks between the U.S. and North Korea. The solution to the nuclear issue on the Korean Peninsula is continuing to march in the correct direction. China offers full approval and support to the relevant sides committed to resolving the issue via talks.
Colombian authorities have shut the borders with neighboring countries ahead of the elections this Sunday. Authorities say they want to avoid any distractions ahead of this weekend's legislative elections, but didn't elaborate further. Progressive forces have raised concerns about violence in the run-up to the elections. They criticized President Juan Manuel Santos for failing to address the issue. Authorities stress that only land borders have been affected.
Remember, in these electoral days, historically, the borders have been closed. Not only the borders where we are today in La Guajira, the borders with Ecuador, Peru, Brazil, and Venezuela have also been closed. We have always closed all these checkpoints. Remember that these are terrestrial and fluvial crossings. The air and maritime checkpoints continue to operate without any problem.
The FARC political party has pulled its party leader, Rodrigo Londoño, out of the presidential race. Londoño is currently recovering from heart surgery after suffering a cardiac arrest last Thursday. In addition to Londoño's health problems, the FARC cited the lack of security and political guarantees as another reason for their withdrawal. However, they've expressed interest in holding talks to form a national convergence government. Our correspondent in Bogotá, José Manuel Jiménez, has more.
The Alternative Revolutionary Force of the Commons, known as FARC, has announced the withdrawal of Rodrigo Londoño and his running mate, Imelda Daza, from the forthcoming presidential elections. The reason given is Rodrigo Londoño's health condition after his surgery yesterday. His recovery time is expected to be between 3 and 4 months. It's worth pointing out that this withdrawal pertains to presidential elections, not congressional elections. FARC candidates are expected to continue campaigning.
Thank you, José Manuel, for that report. With just 2 days to go, Colombia remains on edge as political violence escalates.
The first elections in Colombia after the signing of peace agreements will see some strong contradictions and uncertainties. Leftist parties and alternative forces expect to have a democratic and inclusive spectrum, but simultaneously, political violence continues and is growing as the elections approach.
Not everything can be solved with violence. We must learn to live together and solve our conflicts and differences respectfully and peacefully.
Since the signing of the peace agreement, 228 social leaders, as well as 49 FARC combatants and 13 of their relatives, have been murdered. Despite the killings and threats against alternative movements and the FARC party, or Fuerza Alternativa Revolucionaria del Común, different social sectors have remained silent about the facts.
Society, government, authorities and institutions weren't strong when facing the first aggression to Timochenko. And that was a violent act from another party. They were members of the Democratic Center who supported violence against Timochenko, and I think that is what spread violence to other campaigns.
Presidential candidate Gustavo Petro was also the victim of a recent attack. In spite of the severity of the facts, political elites and traditional parties have remained silent about it. President Juan Manuel Santos referred to this, but instead of condemning the attack and offering guarantees, he said that Petro was overreacting.
This attack on the progressive candidate, Gustavo Petro, could develop into a political killing. That would be unacceptable for Colombian society and the international community. So as Colombians, we must not allow violence to grow because of political differences.
Citizens remember that throughout Colombia's history, the ruling classes have used violence and magnicide to avoid progressives and leftists from taking power. The growing list of victims include Rafael Uribe, Jorge Eliezer Gaitán, and Carlos Pizarro.
The Ecuadorian government has asked Colombian President Juan Manuel Santos to return to the negotiating table with the National Liberation Army of Colombia, or ELN. In an official statement, Ecuador's government said it's willing to offer everything that Colombia requires to achieve complete peace for the sake of a peaceful future for Latin America and the Caribbean. The ELN is the only guerrilla that still operates in Colombia after the government reached a peace agreement with the FARC. Over in Venezuela, the vice president of the United Socialist Party, Diosdado Cabello, highlighted the importance of a peaceful election. He denounced the opposition's plans to create social conflict after the presidential and legislative elections of May 20th. Cabello said the opposition Democratic Unity Roundtable is preparing to stir unrest despite the guarantees offered by the National Electoral Council. He added the U.S. government is supporting the plan and is ready to give the go-ahead to this post-election plan. Venezuelan President Nicolás Maduro handed the bills of promotion and protection of childbirth and the project of parity democracy to the National Constituent Assembly President Delcy Rodriguez. These two bills, along with other projects, are aimed to improve Venezuela's women's wellness and to reach gender equality in the country.
I would like to formally hand to the National Constituent Assembly President the Bill of Promotion and Protection of Childbirth and Humanized Labor, so the Constituent Assembly can work on it, discuss it, and make it a law.
11 countries have signed the Comprehensive and Progressive Agreement Trans-Pacific Partnership, or CPTPP, in the Chilean capital of Santiago. The landmark Asia-Pacific trade deal came as U.S. President Donald Trump imposed new tariffs on steel and aluminum. Trump withdrew from the agreement last year, saying this decision would help to protect the country's companies and jobs. The CPTPP signatory nations together amount to more than 13% of the global economy.
At times of rising protectionism, what we have achieved constitutes a significant political message to the Asia-Pacific region and to the rest of the world. It signals our decisive commitment to trade liberalization, regional integration, economic growth, and job creation. It signals our decisive commitment to comprehensive and progressive, and let me add, inclusive trade.
We'll take a short break now. Join us again after this look at what our multimedia colleagues are reporting. Welcome back. Election observers are on their way to Grenada for the March 13th election. The CARICOM Secretariat and the Organization of American States have already sent delegations to oversee the elections. They've also invited the Electoral Office of Jamaica to travel to Grenada as well. This election sees the National Democratic Congress, led by Nassim Bourke, running up against Dr. Keith Mitchell of the New National Party, who has been Prime Minister since 2013. He previously served from 1995 to 2008, and he's currently ahead in the polls. The Electoral Commission of Antigua and Barbuda continues preparations for the elections, which will see Barbudans voting in Antigua despite a legal challenge. The Electoral Commission says they're collaborating with the National Office of Disaster Services to bring approximately 400 Barbudans across to Antigua to vote. They're still working on finding a central location for the vote to take place. There's a legal challenge against the move on the grounds that Barbudans should vote in their own constituency.
Has been collaborating with the National Office.
In Ecuador, the President of the National Assembly and the current district attorney must appear before the Assembly to give an explanation of recordings made by the district attorney. He said they revealed conspiracy to remove him from his post. Denise Herrera reports.
The National Assembly, by unanimous vote, approved the appearance of the President of the Assembly and the current district attorney at the National Assembly.
Después de la comparecencia,
after their appearance, the National Assembly will vote on the dismissal of the President of the National Assembly and also on the impeachment appeal of the District Attorney.
The coming session will be on Friday in the afternoon, where the President of the Assembly and the District Attorney must explain the recorded phone call.
You can be sure that we're not simply clinging on to our positions here. We are defending the country's institutions. The fundamental thing is that our compatriots must be sure that nothing is hidden and that politics is done with the cards on the table, without hiding anything.
On this, President Lenín Moreno has published a statement saying he will continue fighting to preserve unity in the country. Denise Herrera, Telesur Quito, Ecuador.
Antigua and Barbuda withdrew from the second preparatory meeting for the Summit of the Americas to be held in April in Peru. Sir Ronald Sanders, Antigua and Barbuda's ambassador to the Organization of American States, said this decision was made out of the principle after Venezuela was excluded from the meetings without any explanation. Sanders said the country will take part in the meetings when the situation is rectified. A Brazilian judge has sentenced former Petrobras CEO Aldemir Bendin to 11 years in prison for corruption and money laundering. Bendin was convicted of taking $1 million in bribes from the Brazilian construction company Odebrecht. The judge's decision is based on an investigation known as Car Wash, which has led to the conviction of politicians, businessmen, and other former Petrobras senior executives and its contractors. Peru's Consumer Association is suing Coca-Cola for misleading consumers. The group known as ASPEC says that Coca-Cola's nutritional information presents confusing, contradictory, and misleading information to consumers. The group says that this crucial data is necessary to help the public make informed decisions, particularly regarding the amount of sugar and additives in their products, which has also included Fanta and Sprite. Mexico's presidential candidates have responded to the lack of water in the capital, something citizens in the region are concerned about.
Protests over a lack of water in various areas of the Mexican capital have been on the rise over the past weeks. Citizens blame this on the inefficient distribution of the liquid and careless growth of building sites.
They shouldn't allow those buildings. There are too many apartments in those huge towers. A lot more people will live here, and there's not enough water. In city towers, they will even have a water park.
During this presidential electoral process, the authorities leaving office said that the lack of water is a political move.
The other thing they're doing, and this is more of a political thing, is closing valves. We will catch them and put them in jail, because this is a non-violent crime.
After an event called by real estate businesswoman Alejandra Barrales, the candidates representing Coalición por México al Frente supported the government's position.
Sadly, during this presidential race, we will have people who don't care about anything and that will damage other to upset people.
She said that this is an old problem that comes from misusing hydro resources.
For example, some areas have spent a month and a half with a water crisis just because the system doesn't send enough of it through to them. I mean, what's the reason for this? Maybe they just don't know how the city's system works.
Meanwhile, the candidate for Partido Revolucionario Institucional is focusing his campaign efforts on attacking his rivals. Claudia Schinbaum leads the polls. She comes from the national regeneration movement, Morena.
Today we confirm what we have been saying. She's live illegally. There are 4 examples that show that she is still doing it.
Next 1st of July, citizens of the capital will choose their new capital governor, 16 mayors and 66 deputies for local Congress.
Women in Mexico have marched to highlight the problems of femicide and other forms of abuse.
Women are marching in the streets of Ecatepec, the most densely populated district in Mexico, and one of the most dangerous to be a woman. They march to pay tribute to all the women that are already gone, and to raise awareness of the harassment and abuse they suffer.
It's not just about femicide, but about all the different kinds of abuse that we suffer every day. So we need to show that the country can't function without us. We're over 50% of the population.
The origin of this violence, according to some social researchers, lies in the economical and political system.
We feel like there's a war against women. This neoliberal system we are currently living in treats people as commodities, and the negative effects are harder for us.
Many believe that the government is not taking appropriate measures to combat the violence.
There's a need for change through education. We need to stop repeating the relationships of power that keep abusive behavior against women happening.
Mexican civil society and social collectives are the ones bringing the most important proposals.
Given the government's incapacity to implement effective measures, we, women, are organizing ourselves to create mechanisms so we can defend ourselves.
They say they will keep marching on the streets of Mexico until women are no longer victims of violence, the gender pay gap disappears, and an equal society is implemented.
Pablo Pérez García, Telesur, Ciudad de México.
In Costa Rica, refugee women are making their voices heard. They're using art as a way of expressing and sharing their experiences and the harsh reality of forced migration.
They are refugee women who have fled from various processes of violence and persecution in their countries, and now they share their experiences.
These spaces help us to get to know the country and to tell people we are here. And we did not come to steal anything or take your jobs or to take away opportunities. We came to join you all.
Throughout the process of artistic creation, they are expressing themselves.
Being here in Costa Rica, we've learned a lot, and we have reflected our experience in the photos, the fears, the joys.
They are now displaying their perspectives and the reality they live in during the resettlement process.
And that's where we can show what that represents us, what we left behind one day. We have stressed that life continues, and we have to make an effort to move forward with the help of women's groups.
Costa Rica receives more than 6,000 refugee applications annually. Nearly half are women. Some of them are part of women's groups.
They are working together to advance the human rights of women, and the ultimate goal is to achieve gender equality, because only by achieving gender equality will it be possible to fully achieve the human rights of women, including women refugees.
With murals like this one at the entrance of the Administrative Immigration Court, refugee women and asylum seekers show citizens what they feel when they experience the refuge process in the country. Fernando Francia, Telesur, Costa Rica.
We'll take a short break now. Join us again after this look at what our multimedia colleagues are reporting. Welcome back. U.S. President Donald Trump has signed a proclamation bringing in tariffs of 25% on steel and 10% on aluminum. The tariffs will go into effect in 15 days. Canada and Mexico are exempt from the tariffs. White House officials say the tariffs are an essential part of domestic and economic security. The European Union also expects to be excluded from tariffs. It has threatened to go to the World Trade Organization to impose countermeasures if Washington presses on. Now let's have a look at some other stories from around the world.
At least 7 people have been killed in a suicide attack in the Afghan capital, Kabul. The attack was carried out by a suicide bomber who walked into a crowd and blew himself up. The blast comes a week after another suicide bomb killed 1 and wounded more than 20 people. No one has claimed the responsibility for the attack. Pressure has been brewing in Afghanistan since the President Ashraf Ghani announced his willingness to have peace talks with the Taliban 2 weeks ago. A court in Istanbul has sentenced 25 journalists to prison with terms up to 7.5 years. Most of the journalists worked for Zaman newspaper. They were accused of aiding the network of a US-based Muslim cleric who is believed to have led the failed coup in 2016.
The Cumhuriyet trial is one of the symbolic freedom of press cases in Turkey. It is unacceptable for journalists to stay in prison that long, just because they express their thoughts or publish headlines.
Danish submarine and rocket builder Peter Madsen has denied murder charges. He is on trial for allegedly killing Swedish journalist Kim Wall last year. Madsen has been charged with sexually abusing, murdering and dismembering the 30-year-old journalist. Wall was reported missing after she went to interview Madsen aboard his self-built submarine in the Bay of Copenhagen. French President Emmanuel Macron is in India for a 4-day visit intended at strengthening trade relations between the two nations. One of the major issues on the table is the Rafale fighter jet deal, which both sides have been negotiating for more than 10 years. India had initially asked for more than 100 jets, but dropped the order to just 36 planes after a surge in prices.
And we've come to the end of this morning's news brief. These and many other stories, find them on our website at telesurtv.net/English. And join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. For Telesur English, I am Stefania Bravo. Thank you for watching.
Infested by inequalities, abuse of power, and injustice, the American journalist